At first glance, the Cougar FV270 looks very similar to other aquarium style PC cases we've seen over the last couple of years. It's not until you look a little closer that you notice the case stands on a slant, the angled side fans, and the removable mesh power supply shroud top cover. Cougar says this helps to smooth out airflow and set a new standard for cooling. But do these features really improve cooling, or are they just another gimmick? Well, let's take a closer look at this case, do our own thermal testing, and find out. So this is the new Cougar FV270. You can pick this up in either black or white colour schemes. UK pricing at the moment I'm unsure of, but it has an MSRP of $149 US. The FV270 features a unique prism-inspired design with curved glass, providing a great view of the system. Innovative angled fans improve airflow and cooling. It supports up to E-ATX motherboards, including back connect to eliminate cable clutter. A rotatable PCIe bracket allows for flexible graphics card orientation and up to 450mm long graphics cards, while the optional rotating mounting platform creates a dedicated space for personalising your PC. It is quite a large mid-tower chassis and it's quite heavy with all the tempered glass. It's 530mm tall by 512mm deep by 268mm wide. Removing all the side panels is quite simple because they're all tool-free, but there is a certain sequence you need to remove the side panels in. So you start with this glass side panel. It's held on those quick release fittings and it just pops out. It's actually quite tightly fitted in there. You can see the fittings at the top, and you can also see on this white version it is basically a clear tempered glass panel. Next you need to remove the front glass. That kind of pushes out from the front. So again, this is a clear tempered glass panel, and as you can see it comes with a curve from the factory. Because it's curved, when you look through that tempered glass, the image you see is a bit distorted. That's just the thing with the glass when it's bent like this. Then the next panel to remove is the small steel side panel at the front. Again, this just pulls out. It's on these quick release fittings and it has a dust filter in here. It's a magnetic dust filter, so it can be taken out quite easily. And you can see that it is an almost completely vented panel there with perforations in the steel. Then you can remove the larger right-hand side panel. Again, that's just on these quick release fittings. There's no screws that hold this in position. There's a large vent in the bottom of that panel, and that is also covered by a magnetic perforated steel dust filter. The top panel is also removable. Again, it's tool-free. You can just push it out of the quick release fittings at the back and then just work it out towards the front. Again, that is a large perforated steel top panel, so it should provide good airflow. Then underneath that top panel there is another magnetic dust filter, another perforated steel magnetic dust filter. This top panel where you install the fans, that's also removable, but at the front of this top panel, it's kind of shaped, almost reminds me of like an ironing board shape at the front, and on the front at the top is the front I/O. On there you have a single USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C port, two USB 3.0 Type A ports, a single 4-pole 3.5mm audio jack, and power and reset buttons. So in terms of the cooling, there's quite a bit to talk about. In the top of the case here, you can fit either three 120 or three 140mm fans, or up to a 360mm radiator, so a 280, a 240, a 140 or a 120 will also fit up there. There's a couple of screws on top of the case. Just remove these screws. And then that top radiator bracket comes out. You can see the space on there for 120 and 140mm fans. This side bracket here, it's not removable, but on there you can fit either two 120 or two 140mm fans, or up to a 280mm radiator. You can also fit a 240, a 140 or a 120 radiator on there too. So potentially you could install 360 and 280mm radiator. But if you do fit a radiator in this side position with fans, you potentially reduce the graphics card length. So if you have the graphics card installed without any radiator at this front position, the maximum graphics card length is 420mm long. If you do install a radiator and fans on this side mount, it reduces the graphics card, the maximum graphics card length, from 420mm down to 330mm. Also down at the front on the floor here is the only pre-installed fan. It's a 120mm fan and it's mounted on this quick release panel. You just push it in at the front there, and then it lifts out, and it's got electrical contacts here that make contact to a contact pad on the case. Potentially it is a fan that you could swap out. It is a standard 120mm screw spacing, and it also has just standard 4-pin PWM and 3-pin 5V ARGB headers. Or if you like, Cougar do an accessory, which is this turntable. So this just fits in the same place. When it's got power, the turntable illuminates with RGB lighting and obviously turns. So if you want to put some kind of figurine or one of your favorite characters on there, if you're thinking of some kind of theme build, you'll be able to power that up, and then that'll rotate round and give you a 360-degree view of whatever's on there. I'm not aware of the UK price for this turntable accessory yet, but I believe it has a MSRP of around $25, so I'd expect it to convert to £25 in the UK. So that front fan mounted at the bottom is the only fan that comes with the case, and there's no pre-installed RGB hubs or fan hubs either. The reason for the slant, or why the case sits on a tilt, is to allow for more airflow through the front here. It creates more gap at the front to allow some airflow to that front bottom fan. And down here there's also a small dust filter that covers that intake, so it's one of the nylon type dust filters. There's potential to install more fans to the case. So on top of this power supply shroud, this top cover has a screw at the front which you just loosen, and then the whole top cover removes from the case. On here you can install either two 120 or 240mm fans, and also in the rear of the case there's position for a 120 or 140mm fan or radiator. Below that are the rear PCIe slots. These can be rotated, so it comes in horizontal orientation. There's about 5 or 6 screws in the back that you need to remove, and with all the screws removed you can see that comes out of the case. Spin it round the other way, and then you've got 7 vertical PCIe slots. Put the top cover of the power supply shroud back in place, and you also get this bracket included for vertical mounting. That just slots in there. Secure that with a screw, and then you can put your riser on top of that, and you've got a perfect vertical mounting system. Motherboard support is up to E-ATX format, so that includes E-ATX, ATX, micro ATX and mini ATX. And you probably noticed as well, all the cutouts are there for back connect motherboards. So MSI, Project Zero, Asus BTF and Gigabyte Project Stealth are supported in the FV270. Maximum graphics card length is up to 450mm long. Horizontally it's up to 420mm, and maximum CPU cooler height is up to 180mm tall. Another interesting feature around this side of the case is this cable management cover. You can see it covers up where the cables go through to the rear chamber of the case. You'll also notice on this is a graphics card support, so it's got a thumb screw there you loosen off, and then another screw in it. If you just loosen both of those screws off, you can then adjust that up and down to your required height for the graphics card, and it's there to support the graphics card. If you do want to remove this, it's just a single screw that holds it in place in the center. You might find that it's easy to remove this for cable management. So you take the screw out, and then it just hinges backwards, so you can actually hinge it out of the way. Or if you want to remove it completely, there's just a couple of screws at the bottom here. Remove both those screws and the little bracket drops out, and then you can remove the cable management panel completely. Then you've got access to those cable cutouts at the side of the motherboard tray. At the back it's a conventional style ATX layout, a fan mount at this side, rear I/O, motherboard cutout below that. There's 7 PCIe slots, and then right at the bottom there's a standard ATX power supply mount. Around the right hand side you can see the back of the motherboard tray and all the cutouts. So these down the side and the bottom, here and up at the top, therefore the back connect motherboard, so Project Zero from MSI, Asus BTF and Gigabyte Project Stealth. Up at the top here, there's a couple more cutouts for cable management. You've got some Velcro straps at the top, eyelets for zip tying cables down to, more Velcro straps down the center and along the bottom here, because this is the main routing channel for cable management. There's also various other eyelets scattered around for tying cables down to, so it looks like there's plenty of good cable management options. Then there's these big cutouts here behind that cable management cover on the other side, so you can route all the main cables for the 24-pin etc. through this big cutout. At the bottom is the power supply area, so under here you can see once you remove this hard drive bracket, there's lots of space for a power supply. So it accepts ATX power supply up to 250 millimeters long, but you've got more space than that for hiding cables and routing cables. This hard drive bracket from around the power supply shroud, this can either fit a 3.5 or 2.5 inch drive. Above that is another storage drive panel here. This is held on with a thumb screw. Quite interesting, these thumb screws, because they are captive on this bracket and they're also spring loaded, so you have to push them in and start turning them for them to engage. On here you can also install another 3.5 inch drive, or potentially a 3.5 and a 2.5 inch drive, or two 2.5 inch drives. Towards the front is this angled fan mount. On here, like I said, you can fit two 120 or two 140mm fans, or up to a 280mm radiator. And according to Cougar, the reason this is angled is to help improve airflow, less restriction or less disturbance of the airflow, as it's got a more direct path on this angle from the side of the case to the rear. One thing that is noticeable when you've got all these side panels off is how this curve has been made in this steel panel. It actually looks quite crude in a way, because it's just been kind of cut and then bent, but you can still see the cuts here and around the other side. They're quite visible with the side panels off, and it's just really the paint that's covering them, so it's not the best kind of build quality or the best finish I've seen. The floor of the case has this huge plastic base, or it's kind of a stand for the case. On there are 4 small feet that have anti-vibration rubbers. They're not really on all 4 corners, so there is a bit of wobble in this case. There seems to be a bit of flex in the chassis, and it's probably not perfectly square. You do get a bit of wobble. Just behind that plastic stand is a dust filter. Pulls out from the rear of the case. It's a nylon dust filter in a plastic frame. Once the dust filter is removed, you can see the large perforated section for airflow to the power supply, and potentially some floor airflow up through the power supply shroud if you have some fans mounted on there.
If you're looking for a new chair, then you should definitely check out Booley's. I'm currently sat on their Ninja Pro gaming chair, which is one of 3 models from their gaming series, alongside the Elite and the Master. So if you're looking for something new to stick in your setup that you can sit on and game and work, then I recommend definitely checking out boolies.co.uk.
In terms of accessories included with the FV270, you get this box with assorted screws, some washers, and some additional clips for the side panels. You also get some zip ties in there too. And you get the GPU mount. So this is literally just the bracket that goes on top of the power supply shroud, and then you mount your riser kit to that. But you don't get a riser kit included with a riser cable or anything like that. It is just the mount that's included. For the test system, I'm using an Intel Core i9-14900K with an MSI Z790 Project Zero motherboard, 64GB of G.Skill Ripjo's M5 RGB DDR5 4600 mega transfers per second. Storage is a 2TB Corsair MP700 PCIe Gen 5 NVMe M.2 SSD. CPU cooler we're using for testing is a 360mm all-in-one liquid cooler. The radiator is mounted in the roof of the case, and it's the Lianli HydroShift LCD 360S. So the majority of the tubing is hidden in this case. I think that worked well with the Project Zero motherboard. You just see a little bit of tubing coming down from the radiator to the CPU block. Really nice looking all-in-one liquid cooler that is. And then the case fans for additional fans for testing different configurations. I'm using these Cougar A-Polar 120 ARGB, and they are interconnecting fans, less cable, so I thought it fitted in well with the Project Zero style, and with this CPU cooler that most of the wiring is also hidden on that too. Power supply is a Seasonic Vertex GX 1200. It's 80 plus gold, ATX3 and PCIe 5 ready, and it's the white version of that, so the power supply itself is white, and the only cable that you really see from the graphics card, that's also white. So I have a few pros and cons I want to talk about the case and the build process using the FV270. But before that, let's take a look at the thermal performance. And I ran our usual test, which is a combined Cinebench R23 and 3D Mark Speedway, ran simultaneously for 30 minutes. If you want to check out the full testing methodology, head over to kitguru.net, where there is a full written review page for the Cougar FV270. The default configuration seems to offer the best airflow and thermal performance with the FV270. Removing the glass side panel and dust filters has very little effect on the thermal performance of both the CPU and the GPU. However, running the case without any power supply shroud fans will increase the GPU temperature. We saw an increase of around 4 degrees C in GPU temperature compared to running two 120mm fans as intakes. It is essential to run the case with the side fans as intakes. When we swap the side fans to exhaust, it increased both the CPU and GPU temperature significantly. So the optimal configuration is with side intake fans and intake fans on the power supply shroud as Cougar intended. In terms of noise, changing the case configuration has little effect on noise output. However, running the case without PSU shroud fans or with side fans as intakes will increase noise if you have your GPU fans set on a default curve, as the fan speed increases more in these configurations due to the higher GPU temperature. We actually got in touch with Cougar and found out the price for UK. So the black FV270 will retail at around £159, while the white version is slightly more expensive at about £165. And with that in mind, I've come to the conclusion that it is a bit of a mixed bag, this case. It's obviously interesting to look at with this off-level stance that it's got, the front curved glass. It gives it a distinctive look that will obviously work well if you wanted to show off the internal hardware and have it as kind of a centerpiece. However, it's quite a big case, so having it on your desk next to your monitor might be a little difficult, and the front I/O is not really set up for that either on the top of the case. It's not a bad case to build with. Alignment of all the motherboard screws and the PCIe slots cut out for cable management, although I didn't really need to use those with the Project Zero board. All that seems good. Cable management around the right hand side is good. There's channels to run the cables, plenty of straps and eyelets to tie cables down to, so I had no problems really with the build process, and it's not really any more difficult to build in this than it is in just a regular E-ATX style case. But it is quite expensive at around £165 for this white version. Bearing in mind you only get the one fan on the floor of the case. There's no RGB or fan hub included. There's no rubber grommets on any of the cable cutouts. The majority you don't see because they're hidden by the shroud, but the ones at the top and the bottom of the motherboard tray, they also don't have any grommets on. The build quality of the case isn't great either. When you've got all the side panels removed, there's a lot of flex in the core chassis frame. The side panels don't line up particularly well, and in some places they can be quite difficult to remove and refit to the case, and when you push them into the quick release fittings, they don't have like a satisfying click into position. It's more of a clunk and a clacking noise, which doesn't sound good and it doesn't feel good when you're installing the side panels to the case. And also, for a case of its size, the radiator support isn't particularly good either. Yes, you can fit a 360mm radiator at the top of the case, but that's the only position for mounting a 360. Down the side it's only a 280. On the floor that's not really suited to radiators either, so I wouldn't say it's a brilliant case for custom water cooling either, especially at this price point around £165. There's much better cases out there to spend your money on, but you might like the look of this different style with the curved glass. So not what I buy personally, but I can see the appeal it'd have for a showcase system. So that's the Cougar FV270. Let me know what you think of the case in the comment section. If you have enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you've not already subscribed to Kit Guru. If you enjoy what we do here at Kit Guru and you want to help support us, you can always head over to our store and pick up some merch, or you could even subscribe to our Patreon. And as always, if you want to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to the website.